Abdullah, founding member of Maldives Authentic Crafts Cooperative Society (MECS). With a combined experience of 23 years in the government and British Council of Maldives, Anto now serves as the chairperson of MECS. Her avid interest in Maldivian culture and heritage helped co-found the cooperative that aims to promote, market, and revive local handicraft. She has published works in the traditional craft and is also on the advisory board of the HomeNet South Asia, an organization advocating for the well-being of home-based workers in the South Asia region. Balazs Horvath, Senior Economic Advisor, UNDP Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific, and Strategic Advisor for the Belt and Road Initiative. With a long-standing career with UNDP and the International Monetary Fund in senior leadership roles, Balazs has dealt with diverse aspects of economic policies and complex development situations, including poverty and inequality reduction, social programs, global climate change, good governance, and rule of law. He has been the lead author of flagship publications on human development and on sustainable development, as a strategic advisor on Belt and Road Initiative, and as UNDP Regional Economic and Strategic Advisor. Balazs has led the production of important publications to guide socio-economic policy, governance, and finance. Shuhad Ibrahim, Project Director, Income Support Allowance, Ministry of Economic Development. Shuhad is currently overseeing the COVID-19 Emergency Income Support Program as a consultant at the Ministry of Economic Development. Prior to joining the government, he worked with research team at the Maldives Monetary Authority, the Central Bank of Maldives. He has also worked in several development agencies, including the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Aishat Shahuda, Chief Statistician, National Bureau of Statistics. With over 25 years serving the National Statistics Office in different capacities, Chief Statistician Shahuda has played lead role in the planning and implementation of population and housing censuses and major household and economic surveys in the country. She has been part of the team to develop and implement the National Statistics Development Strategy and the National Statistical System. She has hands-on experience in national accounts and price statistics. Shahuda has served as the chair of the ESCAP Committee on Statistics, and she also represented the South Asia region at the Paris 21 board. Our panel is moderated by Rania Sober, Consultant Development Economist with UNDP Maldives. Rania led the co-assessment team to develop the Maldives Rapid Livelihood Assessment that is being published by the Government of Maldives and UNDP Maldives. She is an international development practitioner with more than 13 years of professional experience, with extensive experience in data analysis, research, and evaluations. Most of her field experience is based in the Asia-Pacific region, covering more than 10 countries. Key publications authored by Rania include Maldives National Human Development Report. Welcome to our panelists and moderator. Rania, if you will please lead the discussions.
Thank you, Luna. Good afternoon and welcome to the panel discussion to mark the launching of the Rapid Livelihood Assessment in the Maldives. I'm Rania and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm very excited to be here. We have a very distinguished panel of speakers, and also we have a very big topic to cover. The final recommendation of the report looks at a medium to long-term recovery framework, as you have seen in the presentation. We've all heard about the different impacts of the crisis on the people, on the economy, and on businesses. So we now want to have this discussion around how we move forward. The proposed recovery framework is centered on the theme, building forward better, bluer, and greener. I'm also excited to announce that there's going to be a poll on this panel discussion. So everybody who's watching can actually vote on the types of priorities that they want to see in this recovery framework. So please do vote. We would really like to see how if your priorities actually match with what we'll be discussing today. So I'll move on to the opening round of the panel discussion. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about the Build Forward Better concept. And I think we'll try to unpack this concept with respect to the pandemic. I'm sure you've all heard about the Build Back Better term. It was initially coined during the tsunami recovery period, which of course we were all part of as well, as Maldives was vastly affected during the Indian Ocean tsunami. But this pandemic is a little bit different, as we all know that all the vulnerabilities that the Maldives face, I think we have been exposed to it to the extent possible in this pandemic. And the crisis is still going on and this makes planning for recovery even more complex. So with this in mind, I'll invite our panelists to speak a little bit about this concept of Build Forward Better and how relevant it is to this current pandemic. So we'll start with Shahuda.
Thank you, Rania. Actually, first of all, I would like to start by congratulating the Economic Development Ministry and the UNDP for this excellent partnership and the collaboration that you have had with the stakeholder agencies and producing this very important report that has a lot of relevant findings for the recovery planning. As we all know, the pandemic has had devastating effects on our economy and people's livelihood. And like Rania has rightly pointed out, we are still in the midst of the pandemic. We actually have been faced with lots of challenges due to the high level of population concentrated in the area of Male. A lot of migrant workers living in congested areas, like issues in access to tertiary hospitals, because people are very much reliant on Male area for better healthcare still, although still the regional development, regional hospitals development is underway. And also it was highlighted that the lack of business support services, warehousing, all these things has affected these small businesses. And as you know, the small businesses are the engine of the economic growth, in every country. So in the even in the islands that did not have COVID cases, like we saw huge impacts because of this reliance on the Male area. And with this huge loss of jobs, like it was highlighted that even 70% of the income was lost for some of the people. So with vulnerable people being affected, actually, if we talk about building forward better, like we don't want to go back to where we started off. So all these issues have highlighted the importance of doing something different. So in light of the lessons, I would say that we learned we don't want to go to the baseline and must try to aim for much higher. And we all need to take this pandemic as an opportunity to change the course and strive to achieve a more balanced and a longer term recovery, more decentralized services in all parts of the country. And we need to focus on reducing this existing inequalities we have, and also use the data and statistics that we already have and try to build more evidence base so that we are able to monitor these impacts and attain a better future, where we can hold these human rights principles and also the social contracts, where we see that people in the vulnerable sectors, like they have lost their jobs, the informal workers. So all these things, there are some wrongs that we need to correct, I think, in the society. So that's what I would say in terms of this theme, how relevant it is in the long term.
Thank you, Shahuda. I think it's a very important point about not going back to where we were, because clearly we are not well positioned to absorb these types of shocks, and we want to go forward being more resilient to the various impacts that we have seen from the pandemic. I'll now move on to Shuhad. Shuhad, over to you.
Thank you. I think Shahada mentioned a good point that we should actually be looking forwards and not resetting back to where we were before, actually. actually. If you are talking about building better and moving forward, I think economic diversification and building on resilient employment and livelihoods is really key and really important. I think the minister touched up on this area in his speech as well, how we're going to be moving into other sectors, diversifying into other sectors, and moving away from being overly reliant on the tourism sector. This includes like looking into other sectors such as agriculture, shipping, or any other like handicraft, or even like trying to expand on home-based production itself. But I think it's important that if you're looking at diversifying and looking at economic growth, we should not just be looking at just a number. I think we should be looking at also in trying to protect the most vulnerable communities and how we can be prepared to the next shock in place, so that we do have the proper support system in place to what actually drives the economy, which is the workers. If you look at now, the ministry is actually working on a lot of key important policies. These include the national minimum wage, and also working on currently it's in the agenda to improve the social protection systems, including the national insurance benefit scheme for unemployed workers as well. At the same time, the ministry is also working on improving the working conditions of workers. Presently now, there's a accommodation guideline in place as well, which would go into effect this year. In addition to totally revamping the expatriate employment mechanisms in place. So instead of just looking at economy in numbers, I think we also need to look to build the support system in place for what actually drives the economy, which is the workers. And in terms of not only the support systems, we should be looking at training and upskilling and moving to a higher productive potential in the future as well. Rania?
Yeah. Thank you, Shuhad, for those very important points. And I think you've really articulated it well. It's not just about, diversifying. It's not just about the numbers. We also, how we do it also matters. And you've touched on the very important points of inclusivity. And also coming back to the topic of building forward better, greener and bluer, and some of the, diversification sectors that you mentioned, like agriculture, and the minister also mentioned about marine resources. There's a lot of potential in actually looking at it from a more sustainable angle. So it's not just having new sectors or expand in the other sectors, it's about doing it more sustainably as well. So with that, I'll move on to Antho. I think Antho also has some ideas on this.
Thank you, Rania. Congratulations on launching the livelihood report. In looking forward, I'll talk about the informal sector more. The informal sector is the backbone of any household. Their income is usually unaccounted and usually invisible. The majority of the people working in this sector are women. Even in normal circumstances, this sector is often unsupported. There are various reasons for it, not keeping proper accounts or undervaluing themselves. So in any economic crisis, it will not only affect them, but the impact is again unaccounted and much deeper. During this pandemic, everyone in the country is economically affected, apart from the public servants and few people whose salaries weren't deducted. One would think Male and Greater Male area is more affected due to strict lockdown situation. But I would say it is not the case, because the main market is here for the whole country. Women and youth living in the atolls, although they are free to work, they had great difficulties in sending their produce to Male for selling. This does not mean those who are in Male are not affected, whereas in Male, a lot of home-based workers shifted their existing work to doing online. They had the burden of high rent, some of the people shifted from craft businesses to food business because during the lockdown there was an increase in demand for food. What I'm saying is some of the home-based workers were able to market their products online even during this lockdown situation. Many are still very fearful of COVID-19. Some women whom we have interviewed very recently said they have used up all the savings and do not know how to pay up their rent. With elderly parents living with them, they are fearful in selling shortages for evening tea from home or go to corner shop. So what we can do is give one-to-one psychosocial support, and in addition it is to advocate wellness and mindfulness on mass media. So what we have to think is immediate support like improving on technology will bring about a great positive change to the women in the atolls. I found those who are most active in the atolls in the informal sector are women. Mostly middle-aged and older women, most of them are not very savvy in doing online businesses with their phones. What I mean by this is to educate the women to do their business online through a simple Facebook account or Instagram, and use of social media will make them more connected so that they can use smartphones for marketing and connectivity. Even before the pandemic started, many men and women are actively in the agriculture sector. But I would rather say they are not able to maximize their output because of the changes in climate or overuse of pesticides. So right now, everyone is realizing the importance of food security, and now would be a good opportunity to introduce better agricultural practices. For example, a leader from the community could be trained and well equipped with knowledge on sustainable practices, so that the community has a reliable resource in times of crisis. These are some of the things we can attend right now. Thank you, Rani.
Thank you, Antho. Again, I think you've reiterated that point about, not just going into alternative sectors, but also doing it more sustainably. And I think your organization has a lot of experience in the area of conservation. And also, I just want to note, especially when we were doing the assessment, it was very enlightening actually speaking to Antho, because since we have seen so many online businesses flourish, especially home-based workers, we were under the impression that the uptake of technology was actually taking off. But after speaking to you, we realized the huge divide between what was happening in the Greater Mali region and the low uptake actually in the atolls. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for those points, speakers. And now I'll move on to Balazs. Balazs, what are your reflections from this discussion?
Thank you, Rania. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this important event, and also for the excellent points made by other speakers. And finally, congratulations on launching a very good report. I'd like to start by observing that development was not sustainable before COVID-19 has hit. This was the case both in Maldives and in pretty much every other country. So after we have weathered the acute phase of the pandemic, we need to build back in a way that ensures economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And this is best done if it is anchored in the SDGs and Agenda 2030. Let me just make one point about social sustainability. We have very recently in May come out with a regional UNDP paper on social protection. And we found huge gaps in social protection systems, not just in Maldives, actually in pretty much all developing Asia. And this is what we found was driven by high informality in employment, and also by technological advances, very rapidly escalating technological advances. Now we had a pandemic-induced health and economic shock, and this has made it a very central issue, that there are many, many millions, in fact, over all of Asia, hundreds of millions of people who need support, and they are not getting it. Some form of broad cash transfer can be a useful complement to the existing system of social protection programs. In this regard, I would like to also quote another paper which was written by the global UNDP network, and it's on temporary basic income. They address the issue from a different angle. What they do is they use the actual data on poverty from the World Bank for 132 developing countries, and they just simulate whether it is actually fiscally feasible to provide some version of temporary transfers to address the major livelihood losses and income losses that these people are facing. And they have 3 scenarios, and what they find overall is, yes, it is in theory feasible. It doesn't cost so much that it's just impossible to do. There are prerequisites. Cash transfers have to work. So people need virtual wallets and probably a unique identification number for all of them, but it can be done. Let me just touch upon one other thing that several speakers before me have talked about, and that is resilience. Indeed, it is very, very important. But what we know is that we are entering a world of volatility, of risk, of uncertainty and randomness. And I'd like to bring in an idea that was brought up by Nassim Taleb. And the idea is called anti-fragility. And he wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. And that can be a useful sort of additional thought that people can consider as they devise new policies. The idea is that we need to build toward systems and institutions that are not just able to withstand repeated large shocks while they stay the same. That's what resilience is. But instead, we actually need to build systems and institutions that actually thrive in an environment which has risk, uncertainty, and randomness and large shocks, and actually evolves in response to repeated shocks. And that's the main idea behind anti-fragility. And I just wanted to bring in this idea to guide policymakers' thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Balázs. And I think the last point on anti-fragility actually is very relevant to us as well. We haven't talked about the climate change, but this is going to be our reality, and we're going to see more different types of shocks as we go forward, and our systems need to be designed to kind of respond to those. I think I'll just move on now to the second round of the discussion. We've sort of touched upon the key priorities and what the recovery framework and the future path should look like. And I know the votes are coming in. So I just want to ask the panelists now on implementation. I think people are very keen to know how results can actually be achieved on the ground. You know, we can keep talking about what we want to see, but how do we actually get there? Maybe Balázs, I'll start with you, and then maybe other speakers can join in as well, if that's okay.
Sure. Let me unmute myself first. I'd like to make 2 large points and a small one. It is very nice that all of the people giving advice to government say, oh, please increase spending on this, increase spending on that, increase spending on something else. But in reality, the government has a very binding budget constraint. So from an economic sustainability point of view, when we are answering the question that Rania, you are raising, we have to sort of pause for a moment. The policy response requires adequate fiscal space. And it is the shock that we are facing is sufficiently large that sort of business as usual type approaches don't really work. We also cannot say, hey, just keep everything you have and apply a patch on top of it. That's again, not something that is working given the size and long perseverance of this shock. So what is needed is an honest review of revenue and expenditure policies that the budget has been following, and actually policies outside fiscal policy as well. And just take one by one all the policies that have been implemented before and see whether they're still optimal after the COVID shock. And in fact, you will find some that were never optimal. And yet the political equilibrium brought about the application of these. I'd like to mention a couple of aspects that severely undermine the budget, not only in Maldives, but in very many, or I might even say most, developing countries. And I call them fiscal termites. They include transfer pricing, tax havens, multinational companies being able to do tax evasion and tax avoidance, the untaxed digital economy. That's just on the tax side, and it basically is an issue about the actual tax base. On the expenditure side, there are white elephant investment projects. There are also fossil fuel subsidies, something that Connie has mentioned in her speech. Now, these are all things which actually suck out resources from the budget. And if you review them and you find a couple where you can actually reduce that leakage, that is money in the hand of government. And that is the way to start creating the fiscal space, not by immediately jumping to try to borrow from abroad, because that raises a very, very strong intergenerational issue that it's basically next generations that have to repay them. It's very hard to address these fiscal termites. It's also not possible to address it by one country alone. However, it is potentially very rewarding. And if this is done in a serious manner, then I'm sure that there could be significant fiscal resources found for the very necessary policy response, including in social protection. Let me mention another aspect that has become very, very clear, and actually several speakers have mentioned it before me. The pandemic has underscored that affordable internet access and the skills to participate in the digital economy and the sharing economy and the circular economy is emerging as a new public good. It is something that would be optimal to be provided by government. This is not just a statement to ponder. It is actually a recommendation that in the context of the fiscal stimulus package, this could be a very, very useful area to focus on. And the argument is very simple. People with such access and the requisite skills to work digitally, they have been able to sail through this pandemic. And the others who were not able to connect and work digitally, they have suffered. A similar divide opened up between students who could continue learning despite the school closures and those who couldn't. And these differences fuel inequality in many, many ways. And they are likely to escalate in the absence of policy change. So that is why considering it as a new public good is a potentially fruitful way for policymakers. Let me just close by mentioning that today the Secretary General has released a policy brief on tourism, and it contains a wealth of information which is very directly relevant for Maldives. So let me just stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do other speakers want to pick on any of those points that Balázs has mentioned? Shahuda, anything on the need for statistics? I mean, if we are to look at, budgets and priorities and really kind of reflect on and kind of forecast things, we need the data, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you, Rania. Actually, when Balázs mentioned the public good, actually, in the statistics community, even statistics is to be viewed as a public good, so that we have this information that is available in an unbiased way, so that people can trust the national statistics to show how we are progressing. Yeah? So we have like all these SDG indicators, like over 230 indicators that countries are trying to monitor. So the demand for statistics is really high, and the issues we have still are already Balash has highlighted the government funding issues. So good statistical system is also very, it requires a lot of funding. So if we are to do major large scale surveys, like we found that we don't have that frequent surveys. Yeah, like for the labor market data, we could rely on the household income and expenditure survey we have done in 2016. Yeah, this type of surveys we do on a like 5-year frequency. But soon we are going to have the new survey results for the 2019. But these type of, in addition to these statistics, now we are trying to look at in the international community level also. It's not only one economic sector statistics, but we are looking at in an integrated manner, like social, economic, and environmental statistics, economic and environmental accounts. So like we are also working on these and the innovative approaches, like even the digital, it's so important for these new methods of data collection. So investments in these type of new methods when we are unable to go to the field and do these traditional methods of data collection. So I would say like data and statistics is of critical essence. It is how we give the voice to the people who we cannot count. So if we have to count all these people in the informal workers, people who are left out. So special emphasis needs to be given to cover the vulnerable people in our data also. So that's, I cannot highlight more the importance of statistics. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Shahda.
Go ahead, Anth.
Yeah. I said I agree with Shahada also, as Bala said, that those who had digital connectivity were able to thrive more in the informal sector, whereas those who are not is still struggling. Looking ahead, we must make some changes in our lifestyle to build resilience for any given crisis. There must be behavioral changes to adopt and maintain sustainable choices and ensure that we minimize any negative impact. At the moment, there is limited infrastructure for mass recycling, but at a household level, I think there are things that we can do to reduce waste. Also, again, this is an opportunity for upcycling things like furniture. Probably this would have happened during this Ramadan. I'm mentioning Ramadan here is because culturally we tend to renew furniture and many other household items due to lockdown situation, people were unable to do it. So, and also a lot of times electronics used in the households are discarded with the slightest fault. So this is due to lack of technicians in the community. So upcycling is something which can be developed to a livelihood. And women must have economic independence. Culturally, in the island communities, household chores and childcare are seldom done by men. So shared responsibilities will bring about a change in the infrastructure systems to provide daycare facilities must exist in the atolls as well. Also, revival of certain traditional skills are very important for communities. Skills development at school level, especially at an early age, is very important. Certain skills specific to islands can be identified and further developed on these islands for continuity. Most traditional crafts and skills at a low environmental cost, and with training they can generate source of income to the island with long-term benefits. Within small island communities such as ours, parents can role model in nurturing the skill sets of young people. For example, one of the main livelihood of Maldivians is exporting dried coconut. Back in the 60s, like our forefathers were the people who climbed coconut palms and looked after the coconut palms very well. But right now, the value of our national tree is also no longer there, and there's almost none who cares for the coconut palm and climb this tree. So current scenario is having foreign laborers come to the mall, especially to climb coconut palms, building up a young generation responsible with the right tools can result to self-sufficient islands. I think we have to bring about a behavioral change for sustainability.
And so thank you for mentioning this point about the behavioral change. I think those are very, very relevant points, especially I think when we talk about the green economy, I don't think, unless we have that change in consumption patterns and behavioral change, I don't think these industries can actually flourish, if we look at even conservation practices and even cultural practices, which are, related to nature. This whole idea of behavioral change is also very key to kind of bringing about the economic kind of benefits in more greener livelihoods. I came across, again, when we going back to the home-based workers, the other day I found on Instagram this community of online stores which sell secondhand goods. And there are 54 businesses in Mali alone that does that. So I was quite surprised. So I hope there's that consciousness, towards these type of upcycling, recycling, and people can see these there's business potential in these areas. So I was very encouraged. Shuhad, you wanted to also say something?
Yeah, so I was just coming up from Shahuda's point actually about statistics and how we're going to deal with data. Actually, I think right now in the midst of a pandemic, we actually need good data and good statistics actually to frame our policies forward. Actually, when we began the income support project, we had quite a bit of challenge in actually estimating what would be the impact, because as Shahud actually mentioned, that we do not have a regular with a shorter frequency surveys on the labor market itself. Shahuda and her team has been doing really good work recently on a number of areas, but I think we need a more cohesive system where all other agencies and all others ministries chip in and work together in actually getting this data onto the table and onto the paper, and such that it could translate into policy actions. When we actually started out the income support, the cash handout program, we had really not much information on not only the formal employment structure, but let alone the informal sector as well. So the information that we actually got from the job center, we are currently nearing almost 24,000 applications over 5 months. We actually got a very good insight into the job market of the Maldives, and I think part of that has gone into to the UNDP report as well. That alone is not enough. I think we should be framing our policies based on the data that we get. We need to be looking at upskilling and working on training programs to fill in the gaps that were created in the labor market, not only due to the COVID situation, but to the evolving situation across the globe as well. There's been work done on training requirements for the tourism sector, but I think we also need to focus on other alternative sectors such as information technology and other related like construction as well, where Maldivian workers representation is low, but there are areas where Maldivians would be interested to participate in, say, for example, more technical areas as well. I think in total, statistics itself, it's important as something that we should capitalize on if we want to build better and actually make much more effective policies, and actually to touch on and make policies that actually are far more wide-reaching. Say, for example, I was talking with Anto as well, and how we can actually expand the income support project to actually include more workers, more home-based workers into the program. And I think this is where the information gathering and actually consultations come in place so that we actually make effective policies when we're building better. Rania?
Thank you, Shohad. I think the last point was also key, the importance of partnership and consultation with the various stakeholders. You know, we're learning so much just from interacting with the different stakeholders. So I think from this second round of discussions, I think we've touched on a lot of things in terms of moving forward, in terms of actually making things happen, in terms of actually implementing the various priorities that we've talked about. And I'll try to kind of quickly summarize, you know, Balazs mentioned about the importance of revisiting the fiscal space and creating fiscal choice instead of borrowing, and you know, the way to do that. Shahuda, you've touched on the importance of statistics, and we've also talked about the importance of digital technology and how it overlaps with every dimension of, you know, whether it's livelihoods, whether it's data collection. I mean, it is a public good. We definitely have to acknowledge that. And to thank you again you know, for bringing up the importance of behavioral change, and also, you know, you mentioned the care policies, which is another whole, I think, conversation that we need to have to create more opportunities for young people, for young women and women in general, and to make sure that, you know, the economic, I mean, participation of women that has been triggered by this crisis can actually sustain going forward. And Shohad, again, thanks for talking about, again, recognizing the need for statistics and being very, very open about, you know, looking at how to make the policies more inclusive. And I'm really glad even through this panel discussion, you've, you know, connected with Anto, and you're looking at ways to bring the informal workers into the income support program. So that's very, very encouraging. So again, partnership is also something very, very key on the menu when we want to look at how we actually implement things and how we see the positive changes that we want to see. So I think I'm looking at the time as well, and I think we've mainly covered everything. So thank you a lot. And I just want to invite the panelists for any final comments. Should we start with Anto?
Yeah, thank you, Rania. I think during this pandemic, women and youth have shown resilience with extra pressure on care and informal activities during the pandemic. Most have adapted and thrived. So it is evident that these sectors will do well with the appropriate facilitation and support through the responsible institutions, equipping home-based workers with technology for better connectivity with market, providing training to diversify the economic activities, and promoting sustainability-related values for behavioral change will bear positive results in moving to a greener, more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient community.
Thank you. Shohad?
I would like also to make, reiterate my point again about moving forward from this pandemic and building better. I think the core idea and the core policy should be on building the workers and building their skills, and also creating a system which is still creating a system which provides the support system and welfare system in place when we again prepare for another, and hopefully not, but when we prepare for another shock that might come in. So we should be focusing on the social security systems. We should be looking to getting the vulnerable communities, also the most at-risk community members, into the system as well. And we should try to infuse technology where possible to reach out not only to those who do not have that opportunity, but to get more people accustomed, and to get more involved in the technology process and current trends, such that we do not have a part of the population which is left out of the development as well.
Shahuda.
Thank you, Rania. Actually, I would like to highlight the demographic structure of our country, that we really need to look into this huge workforce that we have, the window of opportunity. So unless we maximize this opportunity to build on this youth workforce, we might not be able to make use of this demographic evidence. And also, unless we are able to provide this people employment, the young generation with like good wage earning opportunities and decent jobs, unless we are able to save and retain this income in our country, with a small population and the demographics we have, I think we really need to be mindful of this in our development efforts. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And Balazs, any final comments?
Let me just say, excellent assessment report, very productive discussion. Thank you to you all. I have really learned a lot. Just a few of the points that I have made. We have to build back to sustainability and resilience, and even beyond resilience, to anti-fragility. We have to acknowledge that we have a very large shock in front of us, and applying a patch to existing policies does not work. And therefore, we actually need to carefully rethink from first principles all the policies that are applied, both in fiscal policy and beyond. I would like to mention that there are a number of public goods, and Shahuda is completely right. Statistics is a very clear example of a pure public good. But I would like to add to that list now internet access and the ability of people to access the internet so that they can thrive in an environment that we are in today. Very many good points from all the panelists. Thank you very much, and wishing success to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've reached the end. So let's thank you again, all viewers, for voting. Shall we have the results now? Thank you again. I think this brings us to the end of the session today. I've had a great time speaking to our panelists and learned a lot. And I'm very pleased that the report is out there now. I hope you will all read it. And we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of lessons to carry with us. So with that, I'll conclude this session. Thank you all, and good evening.